Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Double Feature Podcast, where every week me and my boy David bring two movies together. Sometimes we're looking for the perfect movie marathon, the perfect way to kill a weekend, but we're always looking for the perfect double feature. David, how are you?
Well, Dean, I really feel like a soft pretzel this week because what wouldn't you want out of these movies other than to feel like you're in the middle of Disneyland? These are going to be an interesting conversation about the history of animation and kind of the history of a particular studio that nobody might have ever heard of.
Ever at all. Like, I don't know anybody who's ever even heard of the place that they have rides at that is associated with this studio. But yeah, I guess to spoil it for everyone, we're talking about what are we talking about, David? I can't really remember what it is.
Yeah, a couple films coming out of Knott's Berry Farm Studios. I mean, Disney Studios. That being the flagship animation film Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, as well as the flagship 3D animation film from Pixar Studios, Toy Story.
Yeah, and on that note, I got my season pass for Knott's Berry Farm not too long ago because it is significantly cheaper than Disney, and also the food at Knott's Berry Farm is better. Suck it, Disney.
The rides are kind of better too.
Just, yeah, I really like the log ride. But back to the point at hand. So these movies, we have Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the movie that pretty much revolutionized how animated feature films were and are up until like Toy Story came out, which revolutionized how animated feature films were going to be up until continuing on to now. Right?
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to think about it, you could probably attribute Snow White as being like the first animated feature. I mean, I know there's probably other things to go through it before that, but this is the first colorized one. It's certainly one of the first to do a full feature on animation. There was kind of an interesting quote I read, or heard rather, from a couple of pieces of research I dug into, in which it was once described that they didn't really want to do, they being whoever was funding the film, a full 90-minute animated feature at first because they thought people wouldn't be able to stand it. They thought that people were going to be sitting there like getting headaches, getting bored. Funny thing is, opposite of that, I was watching a featurette for Toy Story and they said the exact same thing. People didn't think that anybody could stand 3D animation for longer than 70 minutes because they were like, people are going to get headaches, they're going to get bored. Almost verbatim, and I don't understand why, but that's the way people thought about these before they saw them.
It is fascinating how these two movies like parallel in terms of like their development.
Yeah.
Because there are some parallels because Walt Disney staked everything to get Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs made. Literally, he mortgaged his house, he mortgaged everything he owned to get the movie made. If Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs failed, there would not be a Disneyland, there would not be a Disney Studios, there would not be anything because it would have been gone. And parallel with that, with Pixar and Toy Story, I think, Toy Story was the first thing Pixar ever made?
Yeah, there's kind of a long, interesting story to the inception of Pixar Studios, of which I have a little reference here. I have a book by one of the founding members and president, Ed Catmull, that really goes in deep about the development and production of Toy Story and the development of Pixar Studios. Steve Jobs shows up. There's a lot of short films. There's some dancing with what would eventually become DreamWorks Studios. I mean, it's very, very interesting, but that one always fascinates me because it's like, like we witnessed last week, 2D animation was already a thing, so I don't see how 3D animation is that big of a jump. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense now, I guess, but
Yeah.
this is also 35 years in the future.
Yeah, and that's the other thing when you think about it is Toy Story was such a jump, right? Because there never been a feature-length like 3D animated or computer generated film, right? That is 100% completely done like this. I don't think it had ever happened.
No, and
And
it almost wasn't even.
it would have sunk the studio, right? If it failed, I'm pretty sure it would have sunk Pixar.
I mean, if you want to even think about it, Pixar wasn't even technically a thing before this. I guess the way I would explain it is they were more of a startup company making systems that did 3D animation. It was literally called, I think, the Pixar machine that would be able to do the 3D animation if somebody wanted to do it. But Toy Story, because of kind of creative people from Disney Animation, such as the now defunct John Lasseter, they kind of took this and were like, the final step in making this technology, put on the map is making sure you can do a movie with it. And then that's kind of how Toy Story comes apart. There's a very interesting history of like the animation in which the story is developed. I'll get into it later, but yeah, it's a long winding road that starts way back in the 70s, and it's going to be interesting.
And same with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Long winding road that started with, a black and white mouse in the 20s.
Actually, I think, because we'll get into the log lines in a second, but we can kind of start diving with Snow White first. I think I read this, that it started way back before that. Walt Disney saw a silent version of Snow White and the Huntsman in the 1910s, like 1916 or something like that.
Oh, wow.
He saw it when he was 15, and upon immediately seeing it, it was like, this needs to be an animated film, and that's where the inspiration starts.
Whew, you gotta give Walt Disney credit for something. He's dedicated and really persistent.
What? Walt Disney, the man who also tried to create an entire futuristic city that people would have to pay admission to and then live inside of? That's the guy who's obsessive?
Yeah. Who would have guessed?
No,
who would
I
have
would
guessed?
have never.
But yeah.
Yeah, I guess let's dig right into the quick log lines for these two, and then we'll get going on this Seven Dwarfs and the girl who learns to wash her hands story.
Yes, David. What are the elevator pitches, the log lines? God, yes, Snow and the Seven Dwarfs has some problems, but we're getting into it.
We'll get it.
What's the log lines for this week?
The log lines for this week. Snow White is about a young maiden cast away by her royal mother that is saved from the grips of a sleeping death by a gang of dwarves, critters from the forest, and a handsome prince. Toy Story is about a boy's favorite cowboy that is shunned after his new birthday present rockets into the toy box, prompting them to chase after the moving van as their rivalry sends them packing.
So yeah, David, okay, I guess we'll just get into it. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, you got issues. What are they? Do you just want to like just go hard into Snow White right now? Just give it to him.
Listen, I think that the mode of conversation worked well last week, where we kind of dig into every aspect of what these films had going on. I'll start by saying this, and as we should probably start for both of these, the animation for what, even again, it being almost 100 years later, is still impressive for when you think about the fact that it was the first of its kind to do what it did.
I honestly think Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, in terms of the 2D animation it's showing, and in terms of the quality and the fluidity of the movement, is leagues above what we have even today.
I can agree with that.
The fluidity of Snow White's movement is immaculate, and it's weird.
Yeah, I mean, like, how would I put it? Well, so the method in which it's animated is called rotoscoping, and for the layman, it's basically where you take a picture of something that you've actually shot and then do the animation over that as reference.
Mhm.
And it's very apparent in Snow White that they use rotoscoping, because the gestures and movements are they kind of look like that somebody should be standing there doing what they're doing. Some of the angles, even, I would say, look like a camera shot at first, and then they went back and animated over it. Because there's a lot of like full shots, there's a lot of medium shots and angles, like low and high angles, that don't seem like they would be the first thing you would think of.
They not the first thing in like an animated film, but the first thing if you were like a filmmaker shooting this scene.
Yeah, or like too. What I especially got on like some of the full shots where you see like the full. This happens a lot in like that dwarves den when Snow White is moving through it, and you see the full shot of her moving across the floor. Seemed very much like you were looking at a camera panning across a sound studio, probably more to the deconstructing eye. But what's interesting is this process of rotoscoping is actually much more common at this time than people would think.
Yeah, there's a very famous rotoscoped animated short. I think it's for like a musical number in like a Betty the Boop cartoon.
Yeah.
Oh god, what's the song? I think it's Minnie the Moocher. I think is it.
I think so. Let me do a quick fact check on you while you continue talking about it.
But yeah, because like the rotoscoping technique for animating was pretty like known at this point. It's fascinating because it's never done to this level of like quality, right? And I think that's the thing a lot of people like forget is like this isn't brand new. It's just this is what all the stuff that came before it is when it's slammed together and refined.
Yeah.
Yeah, David. So was I right?
Yeah, you were right. Minnie the Moocher, Max Fleischer presents, and it was part of a Betty the Boop cartoon. I do remember that much. What was interesting I noticed about Snow White's animation, getting back to the present point, and I don't know if you noticed this, what was interesting about the way that it's colorized, right? You know, all the color is very vibrant. It's good. It's new technologically, so it's probably very surprising to the person who's paid admission in 1937. But
yeah,
to somebody who's like seen a bunch of black and white films now, you know, way in the future, so it might be like a little bit more present when comparing the two. I feel like I noticed elements of black and white film that were then animated in color on top of the rotoscope. Like if you notice some of the animations of like glass in the film, you can see this when they're looking at like some of the chemistry ware for the alchemy of this magic apple that doesn't really make much sense, or like the wine glass and things like this. There's like a glow around them that is animated onto objects that seems like what you would get on like very like kind of glossy black and white film, or even like just the way that light falls on objects is also something that I would look at in like black and white film where there's more contrast. It's very interesting that I found this, but it was also, I think, part of what gave the film a lot of texture.
Yeah, I think that just goes with, because this is one of the films that's one of the first to use, I think it's called a multiplane camera, and like to really use like cell animation. And I feel like what you're talking about is how certain things have a glow to them, and certain things like the colors are just vibrant in different ways. I almost feel like that's a product of like the technology they're using. It
could be. It totally could be. Because one thing that I was also interested by in thinking about this, the original 1937 cinematic trailer, if I can look it up again just so I know I'm not like talking out of my ass for it.
I mean, we always are, but whatever.
Yeah. I think it has Walt Disney introducing the Seven Dwarfs. Yes, here it is. It's shot in color, though, which is interesting to me. Because color film, I'm pretty sure it existed, but it wasn't like widely popularly used yet, was it?
Well, in 1937, so this is a fascinating thing for like the history of film, is color film was basically always available for filmmaking. It once you get into like the mid 19 teens, right, and into like the 1920s, you could get color film. It was just significantly more expensive.
Hmm.
And I think in like the 37 or in the 30s and especially into like 37, because we get Wizard of Oz in 39, and you get like color film, and it's just the thing, it was prohibitively expensive. It wasn't the fact that it wasn't popular, because musicals were done in color basically as soon as you can really do it affordably. It's, just was a thing that they didn't do because that's how you triple your budget.
Right, and that probably makes sense because this trailer is only about a minute and 30 seconds long. I'll drop it in chat so you can kind of see it as reference. So yeah, it's fascinating, I guess, when you think about the fact that up until this point nobody really saw, eye-popping Kodak color on the big screen.
Oh no, I mean, it's a thing you would probably see a color film very rarely in the theater.
Yeah.
But like, they existed, but it was a big deal if your movie was in color. I guess it's like now it's a big deal when your movie's in 3D.
I don't know about 3D anymore.
Is 3D dead already? Have we finally like evolved to that point?
Well, because like think about this, 3D was even available in like the 50s. It's just that I don't know. It's one of those things where I just feel like that's such a novelty when I'm going to the movies now, and I'm like, I kind of don't want to be bothered by it. I just kind of want to see the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
but then Snow White.
Yeah, so the animation, fine. It's all fantastic, technologically.
It still holds
over
up
the top.
today.
Yeah,
It's
pretty incredible what they were able to do, and certainly it was a feat of a giant undertaking. Now, what apparently wasn't given a lot of thought.
Oh, here we go.
Listen, Dean and I are about to vehemently disagree on this, but I would characterize myself as not like a Disney fan. I mean, let me put it this way: I have a Disney Plus subscription, and I rarely use it. I'm not. I get the appeal of Disney films. I have zero understanding as to why a grown adult can really continue to get into Disney films after they have their first driver's license. I mean, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Is this just you just don't understand Disney? Like, is that what it is?
I get it. I get what Disney is. Disney is for kids. That's what it is. It's for families, yeah, but what do you market to when you're marketing to families? You're marketing to the family's kids. I mean, when you really think about it, that's the whole point. You're dragging the extra 2 tickets of the parents along when you get the kids to buy into whatever you're trying to market to them. So it's one of those things where this is also the very first step in the Disney journey. Of which, it does significantly improve over the years, and it becomes more adventurous, it becomes better, it becomes a lot of things. But if this was the starting point, I'm glad it was, because, man, they had a lot to be desired in the script for this movie.
Oh my god, are you look, like, the story of this is, I'll give you, it's not dense. It's a fairy tale.
Oh, it's
a
dense.
short and sweet fairy tale.
I'd say it's dense. It's just the wrong kind of dense.
It's a fairy tale. It's cute. There's whimsy. There's things.
Listen, I'll give it one thing. Yeah, the 7 dwarves are interesting. They're fun. They're a group of 7 dwarves. They're about as good as they can get. And I think I said this before we started the podcast. the setup for the story, which is true to the original, you know, Brothers Grimm story that this comes from, is a good setup for any story. You know, it's the classic prince overtaking the king's throne story, but now flipped on its head to be the princess is the one who's going to eventually dethrone the queen. And I think it obviously sets up one of the most story villains to ever appear in a movie.
The evil queen.
Yeah, literally named the evil queen. I mean, how much more...
How much more foundational can you get when the trope that you have spawned is literally your character's name?
Exactly. But then it's like the movie takes an interesting turn, or the story rather. So the huntsman thing happens, and that's interesting, right? That's dramatic. It literally... Also, I would say one of the best animated scenes in the movie.
Where she's running through the forest at night? That one?
And then like the huntsman standing over her with a knife, even like that whole. There's a lot. You could feel the emotion in the rotoscoping there. Mm-hmm. A little dark for a kids movie, but still, you know, I get it. It's dramatic. It's supposed to happen. Then we get to the part of the movie that everybody remembers this movie for, the whole seven dwarves and Snow White living in the middle of the woods and kind of taking up too much time on their own bit.
Look, like, okay, the opening section of the film is very, very good. The parts where the seven dwarves come in, I feel, is where the actual movie is going on. But it's by movie, I mean the musical numbers, the whimsy, all that stuff.
Yeah. And the musical numbers are there, as how I would describe it. It's
not as good as Cats Don't Dance. Is that what you're telling me?
Definitely not as good as Cats Don't Dance. I think it was one of those things where it's like they're so oversaturated outside of the movie that it's like I only attribute them to like Disney commercials now, which is neither here nor there. It's like they're the Seven Dwarfs songs. It's like, you know, I hear them in the bathroom at Disneyland. It's not. It's kind of like white noise almost at this point, where it's like so culturally ingrained into my brain, where it's like I don't know. It's like
it just doesn't anymore.
Am I moved or entertained by hearing "Happy Birthday"? No.
Am I moved or entertained by hearing "Hi ho, hi ho, it's off to work we go"?
Yeah, when every white person ever says that whenever they're going to work, going on vacation, going on, you know, they sing that in the car, and it's like. It just doesn't affect me. But
how many people do you know that sing that song when they go on vacation?
Well, it's just like a stereotype thing. I guess is how I would put it. Anyways, that aside, the part of the movie that I'm fascinated by is the things, the conflicts that make up the scenes in this section. That having to do with Snow White is also the cooker. She cooks, she cleans, she tells everybody to wash up. Wow, that's fascinating.
She just turns into the mom of these seven dwarves, right? And, okay, I figured this out, because I had never known how old Snow White is in this movie. And then I found out she's only like 14.
Which is another thing that's interesting about this movie.
Yes, she is considered the youngest Disney princess. So, I will say there's an interesting point that this 14-year-old girl is the new mother figure, an object of, like, desire for, like, this group of grown-ass men. Yeah. They're dwarves, but they grown-ass men with gray beards, and some of them are balding.
Yeah.
It's a little weird.
You know, it's kind of funny that I've heard that cited as like one of the things people find weird about this movie. I'm not so much worried about the Seven Dwarfs because they're mythical fucking creatures, so I don't really care. You know, I get it. They look like old men, but they're gnomes, so it's like, you know, they probably need help being boosted up to reach something in the cabinets, so it's like a moot point there. I think what for me is so interesting is I I watched this documentary a while ago, like for a psychology class I was taking, and the whole documentary focuses on the dynamic that the Disney princess has on the imprinting of like traditional American values in a girl's life when she's growing up. Because the Disney princess is almost as synonymous as hopscotch. It's like a key part of any child in America's life. I also feel like it's responsible in kind of instilling a lot of cultural norms that we follow today, is how I would put it. That of course not everybody like uses for the rest of their life, but like you're gonna take some of that with you, just as like we take things from The Iron Giant or Cats Don't Dance or whatever, So it's just fascinating to me that Disney in 1937, and I'm not saying this is a grand conspiracy either. He was animating inside of his garage at one point, so the guy's just some schmuck who wanted to make an animated film. It's more to the point that it's fascinating to me that in 1937, Walt Disney had so little known what he was doing in making a whole scene about a woman telling the group of men to go wash up before dinner, for then 70 years of influence and like cultural phenomenon to come out of that character, who that's one of the things she does. It's like a butterfly effect thing to me that fascinates me.
I'm almost losing the thread of your thought bubble here. So is it a thing like you're mad at Snow White for being like a quote unquote feminine stereotype? Or are you mad at Walt Disney for not realizing he was making a feminine stereotype that will permeate culture for 70 years? It's
one of those things where it's like, I can't be mad at it, first of all. I can't. It's 1937. That's just kind of what was happening.
This wasn't a stereotype. That's just what it is.
Yeah, it's like, what are you going to... I mean, there were films that didn't do that. There are certainly films that did do that still. I mean, for God's sakes, watch Gone with the Wind.
It's 4 hours of something, boys.
Yeah. But it's just fascinating to me that, like, the biggest cultural conglomerate ever started with this. You know what I mean? It's one of those things, it's like, really? This is what people have been sticking to for 100 years now? Is the movie in which we... I don't know. I think it's like less of like a big nitpick and more like a, wow, it's kind of funny.
This is where we came from, huh?
Yeah.
Because it's true that Disney started with like Steamboat Willie and Mickey Mouse and like all the short little Mickey Mouse cartoons. But Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is when Disney became Disney.
Yeah.
And it is fascinating to see like this is what started that explosion of cultural impact, because Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is the most profitable animated film of all time.
Probably one of the most profitable movies of all time, even if you go by that metric. I mean, it's $500 million later.
I think so. I mean, and it's fascinating how he would do this. So, because it's adjusted for inflation, but how he would do it is because back in the day, up until, I guess, into like the 70s and even into like the 80s, the only way you can see movies is by going to the theater. So every like 5 or 10 years, he would re-release Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs into theaters. Because what happens every 5 to 10 years? There's a new group of kids to culturally imprint Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs to. So that's why your grandparents and your parents and probably a lot of your aunts and uncles and maybe even your older brothers and sisters have the same cultural touchstone memory of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs as a childhood thing they saw. And it's fascinating, the marketing and how Walt Disney did this shit.
Yeah, it's almost interesting that like the advent of home video completely screws this up and is why we get remakes now. Because otherwise they would have just sent out remake after remake. I mean, really, when you think about it, what is Beauty and the Beast, Cinderella, all of that? It's just a remake of this, which is guised under the Disney Princess franchise. That's all they are, is they're remakes. And albeit when the buck stops for being able to really re-release the film, like you say, what are you gonna do? What can you do when it's $500 million talking every time?
Well, okay, so you have a gripe with the I don't even know anymore. I think you have a gripe with like the characterization and the influence that this movie has.
It's just one of those things where it's like, I guess, 80, 90 years later, I'm like, this main character sucks. There's a story about a literal government conspiracy when you boil it down. That is boiled down to she becomes a housewife, and that's how she escapes evil. Of which the main problem in the film doesn't even happen until the latter half of the film. Really, the third act. But
when the queen finally shows up again, I think that's fascinating. The queen disappears for most of the movie.
Yeah, because I think I said this before we started as well, and I'll say it again now to put it live on the record. Just think about if this synopsis came across any executive desk nowadays. Nobody would approve it because it's asinine. When you really think about it, the outline of this film is all over the place. But that's just kind of what you get when you're doing it for the first time.
But yeah, so you have a negative view of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, I'm assuming.
Technically, it's, it deserves its place in history. Entertainment-wise, okay.
I mean, this won not only an Oscar, it won 7 additional little Oscars.
Yeah, I am aware.
You're aware of it winning its special Oscars?
Yeah. But, what can you do? I mean, there are 7,000 million sweatshirts worn by middle-aged white women every year that have something to say otherwise about what I think about this movie, so go figure.
There you go. But yeah, so Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the movie that started Walt Disney's journey to holding the most Oscars out of anyone in film history. I think his record is 22, because he was the producer on so many animated films, and he was the only game in town
for
I was gonna say, fucking decades.
It's still the narrative today that pretty much who's going to win the Oscar for animated film every year is, well, now Pixar, but
which is now owned by Disney.
Yeah.
So it's back to going to Disney.
But conveniently, that is the next stop on this episode, is we're going to be talking about the flagship movie of Pixar Studios.
Yes, the movie that started it all, the movie that is something different. We're talking about A Bug's Life here, which is Dean's actual favorite, but whatever. No, we're going to talk about Toy Story.
Well, no, I think, I'll have a lot to say about that and Toy Story 2 inside of that story, so we'll get to that right after this. Dean, I found a great way for us to do something cool and to make a little money on the side.
Great. I've been looking for a new place to put my money. What do you got?
No investment needed. In fact, it's super easy, and there's creation tools we can use to record our podcast right from the phone or computer.
Wait, why would you record a podcast on your phone? You want? No, never mind. Where do I put my money for this?
I don't need any of your money. We can even get our podcast distributed to big streaming platforms like Spotify and Google Podcasts.
Oh, I get it now. We're talking big business here, okay? So you're going to need a lot of money from me. How much money are we talking here?
No, definitely don't need any of your money. In fact, we can make money from the podcast with no minimum listenership.
Okay. Now I think I'm getting what you're going at here. We need to spend money to make money, so we're talking some big gains here. Big gains.
No, definitely no. I don't need any of your money. Just all we need to make a podcast right in one place.
Okay. So what you're telling me is that you're going to need a pretty big check from me for this podcast. So do I just make it out to cash? Because it's no problem for me. I'll just write it up right now.
No. Listen, Dean, just head over to anchor.fm and check it out. You'll see why Anchor is the best place for us to record, edit, and distribute our podcasts. And I definitely do not need any of your money.
Shut up and take my money. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the second half of our double feature picture show this week, and now we're going to be talking about the classic, the thing that has basically is the reason you have a childhood. We're talking about Toy Story. David, it's Toy Story time.
I mean, what
So yeah,
is not to love about Toy Story?
yeah, I'm looking for something. I'm having some trouble here.
Because there's nothing.
It's okay. So I think I've said this about a few movies. The Iron Giant I said last week is a masterpiece. I think Iron Giant is actually like a perfect film. Toy Story is interesting, right? Because I think it's a good film. It's a great film. But it's weird because I don't know why I can't say it's like perfect. It's just I don't know.
I agree. I would call this a creative film. I think that this film really maxes out on creativity. I mean, a super creative premise. I mean, this is the perfect premise for an animated film, I would say, where you totally take imagination, turn it up to 100. Technically, the brave little toaster does the inanimate objects talking first, but we're not going to talk about that. We get it.
You love the brave little toaster.
Yeah, but I think that what they max out on is taking the premise, making it into a really good story, and then taking the really good story and then supplementing it with great visuals and sounds that make the whole thing come to life. I think there are some issues, but I honestly think it only has to do with like what they were trying to do at the time.
Yeah, I think that I have a big issue in the movie in terms of like its technology, but it's a gripe I can't really level at it because this is literally the best they could do at the time, and it's the fact that the toys look like plastic, which is exactly what they should. They're toys. But also the humans look like they're made of plastic.
Yeah.
Andy is my nightmares. Like, oh my god. You know the uncanny valley effect where something looks human enough to register as human but is obviously not human, so your brain can't get comfortable looking at it?
Yeah.
That is Andy in this movie.
Ironically, I think in the film class that we learned about the uncanny valley in, this is an example they give.
Yes, where it's like, oh, Woody and Buzz and like all the toys, like you buy into that because they look human but they're not close to human, but they're toys, so it's like, oh yeah, you can get past that because toys don't look human, they're toys. But the people in here who are obviously people look also like toys, and it's really weird. And like, but I can't blame it because this movie came out in '95. And this is literally the best they could do.
Yeah, I think I'll chalk it up to this. Should they gone with more of the humans get cut off at the knees trope? Probably. Is it good that they at least saved it solely for Andy and the army of Andys that show up at his birthday party? Yeah, probably. Could there have been more done to avoid that? Ironically, no. Apparently, and this goes back to why I'm really thankful that I read this book like years ago. There were a lot of hurdles to getting this movie made technically that took a lot of years to figure out, because they had been dealing with this production for quite a while, and it's bounced a lot of different places. Like I said, I think in the beginning of the episode, Pixar as a company originally was only supposed to be making the machine that you could use for 3D animation. It was called the Pixar machine. It had the backing of one Stephen Jobs, who may or may not be somebody who's worth talking about. I mean, who knows?
He liked apples.
Yeah, I think so. He did something with phones that was, I mean,
a thing.
Who uses a phone anymore?
Yeah.
I haven't made a phone call in years. But it's like there's that. There's a lot of these guys come from Disney Animation Studios at a time when there were some good films coming out of there, but they were also having a hard time letting their animators and creators get a little creative control. They were trying to play it safe. There's films like The Lion King, Tarzan, Mulan, I think is one we mentioned at one point, this or last episode, that were huge box office hits, but there were also films coming out that were like too safe. And as a result, a lot of animators were dissatisfied. One thankfully got his way in Tim Burton, ending up being able to come up with Nightmare Before Christmas. But this new company, Pixar, kind of gives a lot of these animators an opportunity to go off and be like, let's do it, but with the kind of marketing challenge of it's going to be 3D animation, the first one. So that'll be a reason to give people to come to the theater for it.
They were leaning on, even if the movie isn't that great, people will come just to see what the hell this is.
Yeah, pretty much. And I mentioned too, in an original making of Toy Story cinematic, ironically later produced by Walt Disney Studios, because Pixar would be acquired after the release, after the release of Toy Story. So technically it wasn't a Disney movie at first.
And then it proceeded to be what Disney did, backed so hard it's a land in fucking Florida.
Yeah, no kidding. But yeah, so like a lot of interesting things going on here. Now what interests me the most is kind of this, going back to this piece about the animation. Now the story and the animation itself has developed over many years because these people who came together, Ed Catmull being one of them, the guy who wrote this book, John Lasseter would be one later who becomes part of that brain trust, who then Brad Bird was a part of later. They came from like computer science programs from around the country in which they were developing 3D animation technology, of which even started as primitive of just being able to animate a human hand. Then later on, they started to use kind of this concept of the toy as a way to like easily animate movement and keep pushing themselves as far as trying to utilize this technology in storytelling aspects. You want an Uncanny Valley example? I recommend anybody go view one of the original stories that this is based off of, Tin Toy. There's a baby in that movie that the tin toy is being chased after that is nightmare fuel to beat anything. Oh my God. Look it up right now, actually, real quick, Dean, if you may, because I am telling you, it will make you audibly scream on air. I mean...
Okay. It's called The Tin Toy?
Yeah. I mean...
The Tin Toy. Oh. Oh, no. Fuck that. Oh, fuck that. Oh, that... Oh, the baby looks like if Bill Burr and Gary Busey had sex. Oh, it looks disgusting.
It's terrifying.
So that just got us. No. Okay, I can't even like leave it on my fucking like image screen. That's creepy looking. But yeah, so Toy Story.
Yeah.
That's back to things that are not that bad.
Well, and so basically this short tin toy, I think there's another one that is inspired by a bunch of knickknacks that was just on the desk of the animator, in which a snow globe is trying to come over and get with the hot summertime, vacation novelties. Those would go on to directly inspire this story, the story about what if toys came to life, kind of just because it's a carryover of the technology. And now what's interesting too, in the original animatics for it, so obviously Tim Allen and Tom Hanks, who are the storied voices of Buzz and Woody respectively, they weren't there from the beginning. Originally it was just like they got some character actors to do the voices for the animatics while they were coming up with everything.
Yeah.
What sold them and what sold Disney, especially later on, was when Tom Hanks came in to do one of the animatics. What they did is they took a line from what's that movie, Turner and
Hooch?
Yeah, Turner and Hooch. They took a line from that movie when Hooch is eating the car, put that over an animation of Woody, and that's when they sold Tom Hanks on the film. And from there, you're able to get Tim Allen, who was they thought would be like the rugged type, and from then on, we get like the biggest buddy combination in movie history.
It is fascinating because like the development of this movie is incredibly fascinating in just how it came to be. It's on the same line as, you know, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, like we were talking about, where everything is stacked against this to work, right? Everything is. But it does, and it does because of the story. David, the story in this movie is weird because it's almost bare bones to the point of being like predictable, but the characters are so like well fleshed out and thought through that you're just invested the entire time.
Yeah, I think there's two things I think that really help this story. I'm holding up three fingers for some reason. I might be having a stroke. The settings, first of all, I think are really good. You know, the kids' room, the gas station after coming home from Pizza Palace.
The nightmare fuel that is Sid's room.
That, especially.
Oh, my God.
The glorious aerial action sequence that is flying after the moving van.
Whoa, we're not flying. We're falling with style.
That's true.
That's what we're doing.
You know, some of these are some of the most iconic scenes in movie history. You know, that combined with like the depth of Buzz's character, which I like. Woody is good. He's really good because he's like a really good protagonist to follow. But like the fact that Buzz is an antagonist isn't just like evil. He's like corrupted, almost, I guess is the word. I don't know what you would like. Indoctrinated, maybe. It's
okay. It's weird to call Buzz an antagonist because I feel like Woody's more of an antagonist.
Well, you know, I think it's one of those things where it's like the protagonist of the story is the hero we're following and who's probably changing. An antagonist doesn't necessarily mean villain per se. It's just kind of the person who is antagonizing the protagonist.
Well, I understand that, but it's a thing where I feel Woody is almost the villain of the piece for like the first half, because he's you know, the old guard, he's the cowboy, and I mean, he's the Andy's favorite toy until the new flashy, you know, cool toy comes in, which is Buzz. And Woody's whole thing is that he's bitter and he's mad that he's gonna be forgotten by Andy, that he's being, you know, looked over, and he's like angry. He tries to kill Buzz.
True.
People forget that Woody tries to kill Buzz. And, you know, and it's also fascinating because Buzz's arc is amazing because he has the whole existential, like, crisis of self. Because he's like, I'm a space ranger, and then he realizes that he's not a space ranger, and that he's not even human, he's a toy.
You never thought this would be a dystopian sci-fi story, would you?
Right? Oh my God. Buzz is going through some like real like psychological like mind altering like shit, and Woody is going through like a midlife crisis of want and desire, and then it's like there's Mr. Potato Head.
Oh yeah, I mean,
weird. This movie is weird.
I think there's like two things that really help that along. That's kind of like the beauty of the protagonist antagonist thing we got here is the buddy story is a little bit both are doing the same thing at the same time. So that's probably most what's helping here, especially in that there's then like a return home journey, et cetera, et cetera. But another thing I think really helps that is that they're kind of copying the story of like Hollywood history itself in Woody is the like spaghetti western, not spaghetti western per se, but like
he's the John Wayne cowboy. He's the classic, cowboy male archetype.
Who is then kind of the popularity is taken over by the Flash Gordon.
Yeah, the flashy sci-fi space hero.
Yeah.
It's the thing where it's like westerns got taken out by sci-fi because westerns stopped being popular, and then Star Wars came out.
Yeah.
And
that's kind of like an interesting insight into the whole story of it, because from then on you get the whole, that's the way that both characters tackle the world, where Buzz gets this very, like you said, psychological, kind of almost dystopian character arc, and Woody gets this very, as we saw later in spaghetti westerns and later American westerns, this kind of corruption of innocence type of arc that mirrors a lot of what westerns went through. But it also kind of just works because it's an interesting story in its own. I don't know. There's a lot of, I said this last week about some of the characters in those two Warner Brothers movies, but these two characters are very well thought out, deep characters.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting, right? Because I feel like Toy Story, we connect to Buzz and Woody. Like, as audience members, we connect to them. And if these two characters weren't as, like, if they weren't so deep, right? If, say, Pixar just, like, kind of half-assed it a little bit, or if the performances weren't good, like, if Tom Hanks and Tim Allen phoned in their performances, I don't think this movie would have worked. I think the movie only works because, like, Buzz and Woody are so interesting to follow.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, with you say that too, and it's like with any movie, if the main characters aren't interesting enough to follow, the movie's going to have problems. I think what especially helps them is that, I get it. They were already huge at the time. Tom Hanks was like almost like a young heartthrob at like preceding 1995.
Oh, he was already America's darling.
Yeah.
Tim Allen was one of the most like successful like comedians and then sitcom stars.
Yeah, and they highlight this in the cinematic. They wanted Tom Hanks because he's like that familiar kind of American voice, because they had like a cowboy voice in previous versions that was just a little bit too rugged for what Woody's character would be. And it does. It helps it helps Woody to become likable and relatable, or at least you become empathetic towards Woody. Whereas Tim Allen, he masters this sort of ruggedness that Buzz Lightyear should have, and that he shows through the movie. I really do think that they just capitalized on some of the best investments into two guys probably ever. I mean, I haven't loved a pairing this much since we watched fucking, not Die Hard.
Die Hard Lethal Weapon?
Yeah, Lethal Weapon. That's the one. I don't know why I was thinking it was going to be Time Crisis for some reason.
Fucking Time Bandits?
I don't know.
Also, for that note, so is Time Bandits a better movie with dwarves in it than Snow White?
Absolutely. Of course it is. Hands down.
you
And you can't argue against that. That's true.
Yes, it really is true. Fucking Time Bandits is awesome. I love that movie.
Yeah.
I'm about to buy the Criterion edition of Time Bandits after this episode.
I agree.
Besides the point.
So,
but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, great. So that all being good, one thing that I was really interested by, partially because, again, shout out to Royal Ocean Film Society, he made an essay on this recently, and I think it's really poignant on the subject. The sound design in Toy Story is very good.
Actually, it's weird. So, you know how people say, like, the best kind of editor is the one you don't notice? And that's because the movie flows so well, you're just engrossed by the story and you don't notice the cuts? That's how I feel about Toy Story's sound design. It's so naturalistic and clean that I barely notice it. Everything just sounds like it's exactly how it should be. so I don't like register it, and that's like a good sign.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the point to his essay, and what I really appreciate about it. Except for, there's an interesting thing he points out that I thought is really good to be pointed out here for anybody that has yet to go. I mean, if you haven't watched Toy Story, what's wrong with you? But if you're going to go back and watch it soon, look out for this, because you'll notice that before Buzz like accepts that he's a toy, a lot of sound design designed around Buzz is still very sci-fi, very fantastical. For reference, when his helmet opens up and he thinks he's gasping for air, when that opens up, it sounds very compressed and mechanical, right? Yeah. And then you get the scene inside of Sid's house where he thinks he could fly during that very interesting Randy Newman song.
It's interesting.
But, Randy Newman is the voice of Pixar, so what are you going to do?
It happens.
The voice of Toy Story, really. When he crashes to the ground, it sounds completely like a toy. Like it's plastic.
Yeah.
And it's just like that little bit of sound design as like a point of symbolism is just chef's kiss, genius.
It's interesting because that's something now thinking back, I did notice, because up to that point when Buzz is touching something, he sounds like it's metal touching whatever it is. Then after that, it sounds more like plastic, and it's this is a good. These boys did good work. I can't wait to see the next thing Pixar releases.
And I think it is pronounced Pixar.
Yeah, I can't wait until Pixar releases something better coming around.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can do this voice so well because my family's from the South, man. It's all good, man.
It is interesting because, like, I said that I was going to talk about the next two films they produced, which are Bug's Life and Toy Story 2. Toy Story 2 actually is apparently produced almost immediately after Toy Story. They, didn't stop in between them. And then Bug's Life, just as well, is kind of produced in the same short window. But what was interesting, apparently, this is a story from the book, there was a point in Toy Story 2's production in which they erased all of the film off of the company's servers. And if it wasn't for one woman who was at home on maternity leave having a copy of all the files on her home computer, which I can't remember the story, but I don't think she was technically supposed to have, that Toy Story 2 would have been lost to history.
Fucking really?
So in this lesson, we learn women shouldn't be taught to wash their hands. They should be taught to take homework with them.
I fucking guess, dude. Could you imagine if Toy Story 2 just disappeared from existence?
Honestly, because it's one of the best sequels ever.
It's in the realm of Godfather Part 2 in terms of sequels. Just saying.
I don't know why, but the scene in that movie when Woody is restored by the chess guy from that short they did in Bug's Life.
Yeah.
That is one of the most satisfying scenes ever.
It's so fascinating. But yeah, so that is Toy Story, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is there more you want to talk about? Because I think we talked a lot about the characters and a lot about the production history of the movie.
Well, I guess here's one thing that I think I get out of this week that last week we kind of had an interesting lesson come out of the pairing, and this is one I think I'm getting out of this week, is that despite both these films' wild success, they were certainly faced with a lot of naysayers, a lot of people who thought they weren't going to work. They were faced with a lot of production obstacles that kind of any movie might come up with, but they're harder for first-time entrepreneurs. Is this pairing, I think, is a good lesson in if you think you have a good idea, do it.
I mean, these guys had real good ideas, and they paid off in spades.
Sure, yeah. And it's like, I don't know. It's one of those things where, especially with Toy Story, Snow White as well, because I mean, I have less details on that, but with the whole 15-year-old Disney thing, watching that short, it's just one of those things where sometimes a good idea takes years, decades even, to come to fruition. But as long as don't become obsessive about it, maybe, but just take it with a process that if you like the idea, keep it in your back pocket, develop it over the years, keep chasing after it, and then eventually, when it's time, it'll work, as long as you've put the work into it.
And these movies definitely show what you can get when you put the work in.
Yeah.
And now, David, I think it's about that time for our little wrap-up section. And to lead in, I have the pretentious question of the week. So last week, it was kind of like the surprise one of, how much nostalgia carries the movies. This one is a little bit different. So, unlike last week's films, which were our personal favorites and are very ingrained into us, but were not very popular in the mainstream, these are not only popular, but culturally defining in terms of what they did. Do you think these movies are almost impossible to watch blind now? Do you think that these movies have permeated culture so much that we can't watch these without having that affect the film?
Well, maybe to call back to a previous factoid in the episode, but I think there is one possible way to watch these blind, and that's when you're like 4, 5, 6 years old, and it's at least the first time you can remember watching the movie. Because again, these are movies that are shown to 6-month-olds. Like, these are played on the backs of car headrests inside of minivans. These are on iPads while you're waiting in the doctor's office. These are everywhere.
These are foundational children's films that, okay, every kid in our generation has probably seen both of these movies, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's like learning the Pledge of Allegiance at this point. It's kind of something that you're indoctrinated to do, which is interesting when you really start to think about the level of power that gives one company. But, it's... At least they're not doing anything wrong with it, thankfully.
I mean, I wasn't a fan of the last few Star Wars films, but whatever.
Yeah, and Pixar is certainly a company that has earned its place where it is. So that's something to be said for it. And at least we all wash our hands now. I mean, that's probably a good thing.
I like how that's the thing you take away from Snow White, is the washing the hands scene is just angers you.
Because it's one of those things where it's like, so specific. Why are we on this for 4 or 5 minutes? I just, it could have been a lot of other things, but I don't know.
I gotcha. So your opinion, are these movies too culturally permeated to ever be watched blind anymore?
Most likely.
As an adult, I guess.
I mean, unless you're from a different country or have just been sheltered in some way, it would take an active effort in order for somebody not to understand what these movies are. Which, there's a lot of movies that exist that are like that. There's a lot of media that exists that are like that. Songs, books, TV, movies, and it's kind of the goal that I think everybody wants to have when creating that.
But yeah. But that was Disney. And I guess, to round it out here. So, if you can only watch one this weekend, what are you watching?
And why is it Toy Story?
And why is it Toy Story? Because it's obviously Toy Story.
I mean...
All right?
Yeah, I mean...
I can only defend Snow White for so long.
Of course. I mean, when you think about it at the end of the day, which film has more of an adventure to it? It's definitely not the one about cooking dinner and washing your hands and then falling asleep. It's the one about getting left behind at a pizza place and having to hitch a ride on the back of a, Toyota hatchback that's almost breaking down in order to avoid getting blasted by fireworks in the backyard of the bully living next door. I mean, it's just a much more captivating story.
Like, I can see people wanting to watch Snow White for the animation and almost purely for that, because it's an impressive looking film.
Yeah.
Whereas Toy Story, the story's better, and it's it might be just because CG animation has just evolved so much now that it doesn't look as impressive, but it's impressive for the time. Like, Snow White in Seven Dwarfs looks impressive now, which is fascinating.
That's true. That is quite interesting, now that you bring that up. But, yeah, I mean, it still blows it out of the water. I will say...
Yeah, don't get me wrong. We're a story channel.
All
right? We're watching some Toy Story.
It at least has the sound design to back it. So, go figure. I mean...
Who knew? People born in the 90s really like Toy Story. Who the fuck knew? But yeah, so there we go. David, I guess that's where we're gonna have to end the wrap up here. But where could they find us for next week? Actually, wait, what are we watching next week?
Yeah.
I almost forgot.
Well, next week, to entice you to come back to our lovely podcast, we're continuing already halfway done with Cartoon June. Wow. I mean, time flies. We're going to be doing a bit of animation and live action, which is an interesting niche in the cartoon genre. We'll be hitting on another Disney favorite, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, as well as a kind of interesting pick.
This is the one David brought to the table. I've never seen it, but it looks so weird.
You know, I was thinking about it afterward. There's a lot of stuff we could have done to pair as far as like the subject of the episode. You know, live action and animation. We could have done Tron. We could have done Looney Tunes something. We could have done Space Jam. But I think this film is significant because it has an animation giant behind it and is kind of about a similar thing, about the cartoon world bleeding into the real world. We're going to be watching Cool World from the mind of Ralph Bakshi.
And if you don't know who Ralph Bakshi is, yeah, you're gonna learn today, because that guy is weird.
Oh yeah,
he is the Walt Disney of underground animation.
Oh, and you know why I really chose this one, Dean?
Because it has your boy in it.
It's got Brad Pitt in it.
Ah, god damn it! Brad Pitt will never escape you. But, David, where can they find us to watch these beautiful episodes?
Well, to find Brad Pitt's beautiful face next week and the rest of our episodes that may or may not contain Brad Pitt, you can go to our YouTube channel, In the Frame. We post this podcast, our sister podcast, hosted by Dean and his lovely girlfriend, Film Club. You can also find our kind of hobbyist podcast that we do every now and again, Too Obscure for TV. We find some weird picks to put on that one. You can follow us on any place that you can listen to podcasts, audio-wise, Spotify, Radio Public, other ones that we don't even yet check up on probably, but they're posted to. Not Apple Music, though. Grown. You can also follow us on social media websites to keep up with us, such as Instagram, where we are DD_Double Feature Picture Show, as well as on TikTok. We post little tidbits of extra things and other things, such as maybe some history, maybe some promos, maybe a lot of other stuff. Who knows? There you can find us as Double Feature Picture Show. So go follow us and keep up with everything that we do.
And with that, I think that ends our week at Disneyland. David, let's go out, because I'm fucking tired.
Let's go get a churro, man. I feel that's what I feel like right now.
It's gonna be great. Let's go to Knott's Berry Farm, ride the log ride, and just chill.
The locals know.
All right, we know.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Peace.
See ya.